Today we're going to be talking about the reality show known as the U.S. presidential elections. And we're going to talk about some of the issues surrounding the elections or selections or whatever we want to call it. Miss Cynthia McKinney, Miss Dr. Cynthia McKinney, how are you?
Well, I'm doing fine. I think it's late at night where you are, but it's the afternoon for me, and it's bright outside, and so I'm ready to share my ideas.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, first let's start with Hillary Clinton. A lot of people are seeing that she's coming off of the heels of the so-called first black president, Barack Obama. She could possibly be the first woman president, Hillary Clinton. She is a former first lady, current secretary of state. Who is Hillary Clinton? What is her history in particular in Haiti as well as in Rwanda, as well as anywhere else on the planet where she is causing problems? And can you tell us a little bit about who this woman is that they are pushing to be the leader of the quote-unquote free world?
Yeah, well, I just finished writing something about Hillary Clinton. The name of the piece is, or at least for the time being, the name is Loose Lugs, Lose Elections. Are the wheels falling off Hillary Clinton's campaign car? So basically, what I'm talking about is how you can have this person running for president of the United States with so much, how can I say, baggage at the same time. And the media basically are just basically hiding the more, how can I say, neutral aspect of the Clinton campaign. By that, what I mean is the secretary or the former secretary hasn't had to answer one question about Haiti. But what is the Secretary of State's legacy in Haiti? One, the theft of a presidential election in 2010, in which her chief of staff, literally, according to the leader of the Presidential Election Commission in Haiti, her chief of staff called out the wrong name, setting up the stage for a fraudulent president to be sworn in Haiti. That was point number one. Then point number two is Secretary Clinton's brother, after the fraudulent Haitian election, ends up with a gold mine. He ends up with a contract to mine gold in Haiti, which is beyond all comprehension because the Haitians have always said that they weren't going to mine any gold. They wanted to fight and get their gold back from the U.S. that stole their gold during an occupation during the early 1900s. And not since then has Haitian gold been touched. But not so with the Secretary of State, and not getting one question about the relationship between her brother and the gold that belongs to the people of Haiti. That's Haiti. Now, we haven't even gone to Libya, and of course, Libya doesn't even exist as a functioning state, and that has everything to do with the tenure of Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State. Not only is Libya not functioning as a state, but we also have the murder of the U.S. ambassador to Libya, and Hillary Clinton hasn't had to answer for that, assume responsibility for what happened in Benghazi, let alone what is currently going on in Libya, and that was going on in Libya while she was Secretary of State. So we've got these faux pas that have resulted in Libya, Cote d'Ivoire, Haiti, Rwanda. I mean, how far back does one have to go? Well, Rwanda is actually under Bill Clinton. But the question I would ask from Hillary Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State is, and the Obama administration is, are you better off today than you were 8 years ago? And I dare say the answer for everybody is a resounding no.
What do you think about this Trump mania that is taking over white America, where they are following the racist rants of Donald Trump and him being the front runner for the Republican Party? What does that say about America?
Well, it probably says that there were some very savvy people who met in a back room someplace and decided that they were going to throw a monkey wrench into the 2016 campaign. I don't see Donald Trump as being any significantly different than Hillary Clinton. Didn't I just recount the, not attributes, but the policies of Secretary Clinton? Weren't they devastating for people in Africa, people in Asia? The policies of Barack Obama devastating for people in the United States? What's the difference?
Right.
Either you talk about it out loud, or you live it every day, and you live it quietly. But what's the difference?
Right. You recently wrote an article on the Electoral College. Many of the people listening to the Block Report know very little about the Electoral College. Can you tell them the history as well as the function and how people are inducted into the Electoral College in the United States?
Well, the electors are actually elected, and the electors are also the voters. The language is somewhat kind of confusing. In Georgia, the elector is the voter, and the voter then votes for those who will become electors. It's very interesting. Well, anyway, but the history of the Electoral College is that the founding fathers didn't want the average ordinary people to gain too much power in the realm of policy. And so the restrictions on who could participate were constituted hurdles that one had to overcome in order to participate in the process, in the political process in the U.S. So, for example, even though you had a lot of black people who were transported here through the transatlantic slave trade, they weren't considered citizens, and so they couldn't participate. White men couldn't participate in the decision-making of the country, of the state. White men who did not have land. So you had to have enough resources, financial wherewithal, in order to have land, in order to be able to significantly participate in the U.S. political process. Not only that, if you were a woman, then that was too bad, you didn't count. And so the Electoral College has its origins in this idea of who counts and who doesn't count. Who counts enough so that they can have the last say. You know how a married couple will have an argument, and then the husband will say something and the wife will say something, and then the husband will say something, and then the wife determined that the husband is not going to have the last word, then she will say something, and it goes on and on and on like that.
Right.
Well, basically, the Electoral College was created for this very purpose, that only a certain segment of the population would have the final say. And these safeguards against real democracy are built into the structure of the U.S. political system.
Well, can you talk a little bit about the role of lobbyists in the United States electoral system as well as the United States government?
Well, you've got lobbyists that are public lobbyists, that's people like me and you. We have a point of view, and we would like that point of view to be reflected in the policies of our country. And so we raise our voices so that those who are elected can hear them. In the U.S., our form of governance is an indirect democracy. And so in indirect democracy, we don't have a say on the policy directly. We have a say only indirectly, and we give our power to people who ultimately have the say. Now, I, quite frankly, view this indirect democracy that we call a republic, I view it as an easy way for those with power to maintain their power. Because instead of, for example, this is what the Jamahiriya was all about in Libya. Libya's Jamahiriya was not an indirect democracy, it was direct democracy. So that every Libyan, 7 million, all 7 million of them, got input on whatever the policy was. When I was there, they were trying to decide if they were going to increase the contribution to education from the oil revenues, or if they were going to decrease the price of gasoline for the automobiles that people basically were practically given. And this was the policy that was under discussion when I was there. Every Libyan had 2 places in which they would voice their opinion. That was with the tribal council, and that was at their place of work. Cuba has a similar kind of hybrid representational system, but the Libyan Jamahiriya was almost a pure form of direct democracy until it was tampered with by outsiders who wanted to get their hands on the oil, and they didn't want the 7 million Libyans to have anything to do with the decision making. And so a few Libyans who were on the payroll of various organizations in the United States were the ones who said, oh yeah, come and bomb our country. We want you to bomb our country and bomb the Jamahiriya out of existence. So this indirect democracy that we have in the United States actually steals our voice and our power, and then we hand it over to these people who are influenced by lobbyists. As I said, there are public lobbyists, but the most pernicious type of lobbyist is a private lobbyist. Those are the corporate lobbyists. And so all of a sudden you've got these fancy cell phones, smartphones you call them, and you've got these games, Xbox and PlayStation, and all of a sudden you find out, well, the mineral that I need in order to make all of these electronic gadgets work is located, 80% of it is in Democratic Republic of Congo. Well, now, I'm not going to engage in fair trade with the Congolese people so that I can have access to their coltan. I'm just going to steal it. And so then all of a sudden I introduce a bill that says, no, the United States cannot import coltan from Democratic Republic of Congo. And all of a sudden, I get all of these lobbyists from Microsoft and everybody, all of a sudden now, Because the bottom line is that, no, the Congolese people don't deserve to have the right to live based on their patrimony. No, we have a right to have that coltan that's underneath their soil, even if it's mined with slave labor. We don't care about that. And that is basically what has come to be construed as the U.S. political system now. Wanton, private profiteering that's called lobbying. In fact, so much so that the former president, our former president, Jimmy Carter, called the United States an oligarchy. He said that under no circumstance would he have been able to be elected if the rules, regulations, and laws of today existed back in the 1970s when he ran for president and won.